Hi everybody. Welcome to Green Party Sessions. My name is David Rich, co-host of said sessions. Calvin, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, Calvin Tomaschko. I'm a newer Green member, and I'm excited to be here. Let's talk.
All right. So our first guest, and rightly so, is Peter Schwartzman, who is the newly elected mayor of Galesburg, Illinois. Congratulations on your victory.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So I had an aunt and uncle that lived in Galesburg when I was growing up, and it was a very charming town right on the river. There it was. I really enjoyed going there. So good for you. It's got a lot of very cool history. It was on the Underground Railroad. It was one of the stops along the way. My middle school's type name, Carl Sandburg, the Illinois poet, is from there. Jim Sundberg, I believe his name was a Texas Rangers catcher in the MLB. So there's a lot of history. The fifth debate between Lincoln and
Douglas.
Douglas. Thank you.
Douglas.
The fifth one there was he fought Davis. He right, okay. The fifth debate between those two, where it was in Galesburg. It was founded the first Chicago anti-slavery organization was founded in Galesburg. Very, very reputable and noble history for sure. So good for you for being in such historically cool hands.
Well, it's nice to know. Yeah. I mean, I moved here in 1998, so I inherited all that.
Well, sure, you weren't around for any of that, no. But so why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, Peter? Like where you started, like politically before joining the Green Party, when you joined the Green Party, and why? We'll start there.
Well, I moved to Illinois in 1998. I had finished my PhD at University of Virginia in environmental sciences with a focus on atmospheric science. I mean, I was trained as a climatologist. So back in 1998, well, basically through the 90s, I was studying the Earth and what humans were doing to it in various ways. And so that was really a profound influence on me and what I've been doing since. I grew up in Northern Virginia, so going to the University of Virginia was kind of home. Both my parents still live in the Northern Virginia area right now, and that's kind of my second home, as it were. But I moved here to Galesburg, Illinois in 1998 and started teaching at Knox College. And that school goes back to 1837, so it's been around for a while. I was the first full-time hire in environmental studies. It was a program that had a few members in different departments, but it didn't have really a head. And so it wasn't a department. And it took about 2 years for us to do that. And so in 2000, we started the environmental studies department at Knox. And I was the first chair of that for the first 14 years. Now we have two and a half other faculty who are part of the environmental studies department. And we have about another 10 people in the school that teach courses in the area. But my political background, I mean, I grew up, my dad has been very active politically in the Washington, D.C. area since I was born. I was exposed to lots of different, progressive causes, the anti-nuke movement back in the 80s as a high school kid. I mean, I remember going around getting signatures for the nuclear freeze, which was a really profound thing. I remember traveling when I was actually 15. Probably my most transformational experiences. I got to go to the Soviet Union for 5.5 weeks and spend time at a camp there called Camp Artek. And Camp Artek was a camp that it was an international youth camp. It was considered the most prestigious camp in the Soviet Union at the time. I was just blessed. I was one of about 12 Americans that year that went. People have been going to that camp from the United States since the 1960s. And in fact, my daughter went just a couple years ago, which was quite amazing. Her experience was quite different than mine, but nonetheless, that exposed me to the world and the fact that there are human beings who speak differently than me, who look differently than me, but have a common interest in peace and justice and solidarity. And that was a really powerful message for me to learn at 15. So coming back to the United States, and then, I spent a lot of time doing my graduate work. I was involved in I was definitely involved in the anti-apartheid movement when I was in college. That was a big thing in the early 90s in particular. And then I was taking the history of Soviet Union, and that's when the Soviet Union collapsed that year. And so that was pretty powerful message in terms of where the world was going and what was possible. I had been there just a few years before, and no one had imagined that was even conceivable. And that gave me an open mind to what the possibilities really are. That despite what everyone says about whatever, whether it be stability or instability, you don't know. And in fact, most importantly, in my view, is you can make stuff happen. You can make things happen. For those who think you can't, well, what are they basing that on? Most of the time, it's just based on a lack of hope, a lack of inspiration. So the Green Party was certainly something that was getting. Well, let me go back. So in 2000, right, we had the hanging Chad debacle. And that really, let's see, I was about 31 or 2 at the time, living in Galesburg, just newly moved to Galesburg. And it kind of opened my eyes to what's really going on with these two parties. The way the fallout of the post-election really opened my eyes to the idea that these two parties don't seem to be playing by the rules, okay? The way that Gore conceded the election soon afterwards, after Fox News declared Bush the winner prior to that being confirmed. I mean, all this, it was just a shenanigan, right? It was a shenanigan, and it really opened my eyes to there's got to be something more. There's got to be something richer. It's not that I didn't know that there was something bigger and better. I had been following some movements in Europe at that time. And I knew, of course, that Ralph Nader was running, and then of course I heard a lot of backlash about, well, Nader caused Gore to lose, and I examined that myself and found that to be a bunch of rubbish, basically just a lot of sour grapes. And I have arguments with even a lot of local people about that, and they often, they've decided what they've decided, and they blame the Green Party for that, and I think that's just an excuse, frankly. And honestly, we live in Illinois, right? So here's the deal, folks. Here's the deal, okay? We live in one of the most corrupt states. I think we were just voted number 2 in the nation. We live in the state it's in the top 10 worst regressive tax structures in the country, okay? And definitely one of the worst among northern states. And who controls virtually every power structure within the state? The Democrats do, right? So now, how do we make sense of that? How does the average Democrat make sense of that? Well, my view is I'm not beholden to either of the two parties. In fact, I campaign. We can talk more about that. People would ask me, probably every third person would say, "Well, what party are you with?" And I'd usually say I'm running as an independent. We're all running as independent. And there might be Green Party people that feel that I should have said the Green Party, but that would have required a lot of education. And in fact, at this point, I'm in the position to give that education. But when you're running an election, you don't want to create confusion that is not necessary, frankly. And this was really there were 3 people running. There was the incumbent 2-time mayor who owns the only radio station in town that plays Fox News, and until recently, Rush Limbaugh. Really? Although I heard him just the other week, he was doing a recording. So they're still playing him as best they can. So that was our mayor for 8 years. And then we had a third person who jumped into the race, a woman who had been labeled as a progressive. I'm not so sure she is, but anybody kind of left of the mayor, I guess, is considered progressive. And I had to, I walked door to door, and me and several other people, and we hit, I don't know how many doors we hit, but there are 13 something thousand doors, and I bet you we hit 12,000. I'm pretty confident we hit 12,000 doors. And that's the old school way of running a campaign. And I'm very proud of that. And that was kind of what kept me sane through the 38 days that I was doing that. Because like every day I'd say, okay, I can't listen to all the rhetoric and all the nonsense. How many doors have I knocked on today? And, and so get outside, rain, sun, shine, wind, cold, doesn't matter. I have to knock on some doors. And if I'm not knocking on doors, then I'm not doing my part.
Absolutely. Well said. Very well said. You won 47% to the incumbent's 41, and this third person whose name I forget got about 12, I think, percent. So, it was somewhat close, but not terribly close. I mean, it was definitely clearly the people spoke. And you're right. So the consolidated, the odd year numbered year elections, the consolidated elections as they're called, people, because there's also local, people tend to run independent. In my county alone, if I looked at, I just ran down the entire thing. I think I saw one person said Democrat or something like that. Even people I know that are registered Democrats who are running for office ran as independents, because it's just the party affiliation at this level, I guess, for some reason doesn't matter. I don't know, or maybe it should. But Calvin, did you want to take the reins here?
It answered one of my questions, which is really cool. How did you reach this many people? And it was that door to door. And that was you personally, or did you have like a pretty solid staff out there with you doing the door canvassing as well?
Well, I kept track of the numbers. So I walked 75 hours myself. The rest of my team walked about 106.
Wow.
And I would guess about half of that was one other person. So it was really a two-man team with a bunch of other stragglers who helped, right? Mm-hmm. And the students, there was some, pushback. Well, I must have whipped my students into action, and they must have carried the day. And that's been clarified. Okay, the students walked maybe 20 hours. A couple students volunteered. I'm not even on campus because I've been teaching all my classes offline. I was on sabbatical last year, so I've had very little contact with students. But a few students showed interest, and they wanted to canvas with me, and I certainly afforded them that possibility, that opportunity. I have to put a plug in for my amazing assistants. I had two people step up who I barely knew. One I didn't know at all until I announced, and the other person I barely knew. And that's Melissa Wengel, who had almost no political experience prior to this, but is just a marvelous editor and was really good at framing the message and keeping me on task. And then Reverend Jowers, an African-American gentleman who is a minister in a church here, and he connected me with some people in his community. And they both pushed me. They both pushed me to keep the message clear, and keep the message strong. So we use social media very, very effectively. Mm-hmm. That's something the mayor did not do at all. Now he aired lots of commercials on his own radio station. The sheriff advocated for him, and I lost track of how many times I heard his voice on the radio. We also had the Knox County attorney, who was just recently won, who espouses or ran as a Democrat, also supported the mayor. He was a former alderman, so-called liberal alderman. He supported the mayor very openly and did a very active campaign on the mayor's radio station. And as far as I'm concerned, good. I'm glad they did. I'm glad they showed their true colors. It was really profound. It really threw a kind of, this whole election, I think, really threw a lot of perceptions away, like that a professor couldn't win. I'm only the second professor in the history of the college to be the mayor, and the last one was 100 years ago. The fact that I'm people who know me know I'm quite left, but I'm also open-minded in terms of working with people. I do not shut myself off to other minds. I think we live in a local community. It's critically important that we work together to find common solutions. And it's not like, well, just my band of people are going to dictate what's happening. That's not what's going to happen in Galesburg. Galesburg is not run by the mayor. It's run by the city manager. And that's what form of government it is. So I'm a catalyst for change, I say. And a couple other things that I think, the mayor, of course, is a conservative. He runs a conservative radio station and has done so for many, many, many years. Yet he's not one of the most well-known Democratic leaders to represent him and espouse his campaign. But it didn't work, right? Because there's something about authenticity that I think is lost in the larger politic, and we can talk more about that. But I think I'm an authentic character, and people don't know what to make of me, okay? Because I don't fall into categories that they can assume, and I like that. I love that. I love that independence. And I had to bend. A couple of things I had to do to win this election. I had to get a cell phone. I'd never had a cell phone before until this election.
Really?
Yes. And this is my girlfriend's daughter's used phone, but it works. It works. That's one thing I had to do. I had to iron my clothes more often. I'm typically a guy that irons my clothes maybe 3 times a year, maybe wears a tie twice a year. The iron got broken out a few more times than that. Not that many more, but definitely more. And I suspect I'm going to have to use it more often. Let's see. I just cleaned my porch, my front porch. Well, I didn't clean it. My girlfriend did, which was really a beautiful thing, frankly. I don't know how she did it. She's a miracle worker. But if you had seen my porch prior to this, you would have thought that the mayor-elect lived as a hoarder extraordinaire, okay? Collecting yard signs, collecting pots of dirt, because I love to do urban agriculture, collecting pretty much odds and ends. She's described the experience of cleaning my porch as an archaeological dig. Okay?
Look what I found from 20 years ago.
So those were some of the bending that I had to do, okay? And but I didn't break. I did bending, but I didn't break. And it's a learning experience. Okay, so let me tell you just one thing. So I had some Democratic forces, former students, reach out to me early on in the campaign. They said, look, we run campaigns around the country. We know how to get access to van and all that, right? The Greens also reached out to me with the same information, but they did so a little later. So I had lists of all the Democratic voters, okay, of recent elections. And those are the doors. I had the addresses. So I was going to knock on the doors. So the first 2 days I did that. And then, but I had to use the phone. And, I'm like, I'm not into the phone. I don't even know how to use the phone. And so I knocked on a few wrong doors. And then I found that those doors were really important. Like there were people that lived there that I needed to talk to. And so then after 2 days, I said, enough of this van. I'm going to knock on every door. I don't care. Okay. And I told all of my worker bees or my supporters to do the same. And we literally knocked on every door. I don't care if there was a Trump sign in front of the door. I don't care. I mean, I even saw some QAnon signs. I mean, I saw all kinds of stuff. Okay. But I knocked on the door. Now, I might have walked a little faster off those porches, particularly when, on the door, you see a gun. It's like, if you can read this, you're too close. I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of a bad sign because I can read and I don't even have my glasses on. So, but I still knocked. I left my card. And the point is, I knocked on every door because I felt like these human beings that live behind that door, they are part of Galesburg. And if I get elected, I represent them just as much as I represent the person who might have been on that van list.
Right.
And what I found out from a lot of people, they'd say, I don't vote. I never vote. And my response to them is, let me give you a reason to vote this time. And I said, let me tell you about myself. And I would get teary very quickly because I realized I was talking human to human to someone who had basically just completely abandoned the whole political process in the standard, when I'm saying political, they can be political, but not in the standard way. And I was like, I'm opening a door for them, possibly, that could manifest in something. Like maybe they want to volunteer to work with youth or seniors. Maybe they want to grow a garden, because that's one of the things I really want to do in Galesburg. Maybe they want to, just kind of change the vibe in the community, that this is a great place to live and that you live here and you should be proud of living here for all the reasons you just documented, all the great historical stuff that has happened here. That's something that every member that lives in this community should know and embrace. Okay. And so when I had that opportunity, I would leave that porch and I said, win or lose this election, right? I have made contact with that person.
Yeah.
And I want to do, seriously, I know this sounds far-fetched. I walked for about 38 days. That's just a little over a month. A year from now, I want to walk the same. I want to do it again. And I want to do it every year that I'm in office, because that's what we need to do. The people need to know that the mayor will walk to your front step and listen to whatever you have to say, whatever grievance, whatever frustration, whatever dream, whatever excitement, that has to happen. And I'm excited to do it. And I promise this, I haven't said this vocally, so you're the first to hear. I promise to do that every year from now on.
That's very cool. Very cool. Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. More people should do that. I'm not sure that if Lightfoot could get away with it in Chicago, but yes, in a smaller town like Galesburg, for sure. I mean, maybe the alderman should, don't you think, Calvin? Get around, start knocking on doors, and say hi. I represent you. What do you? How's everything going?
Absolutely. It's a public service position. One of the offices to serve the public. So to show yourself as being available, not just you can call an office and you can maybe visit the office in this lofted tower, but I'm out there and I might even come to you. That's brilliant. And I think we need more of that.
Absolutely. And, and you're right, Peter, there's a lot of people who are, just disenchanted with politics completely, and probably mostly because of the federal level nonsense that we have to experience day in and day out, especially the last 4 years. But the local politics is, first of all, politics goes back to the ancient Greek word politic. Aristotle even talked about how we all have in us, in our ability to reason, sort of a political capacity, and that politics just means policy making. It's people getting together to represent their community, say, hey, what are we going to do with our community? Whether it be roads or schools or hospitals or daycares or whatever, what kind of entrepreneurs do we want? What kind of businesses do we want in our community? What kinds do we not want in our community? How are we going to farm? How are we going to grow food? All these things need to be talked about and discussed. And if you leave yourself out of it, unfortunately, it might be harsh to say, but you kind of have nobody to blame but yourself if something goes not your way. I mean, obviously that needs to be tightened up a little bit. I mean, you can vote and still lose, that kind of thing. But it's important to get involved, and I think more so, not more so, it's at least equally important, if not more important, to get along in local politics, because that's really where the rubber hits the road. The kind of decisions that you and like you said, Galesburg, the city manager, the decisions and the aldermen and the trustees, whatever you call them now, they're are going to make are going to affect people's day-to-day lives. You're talking about local taxes, you're talking about local roads, you're talking about education, you're talking about healthcare in certain ways. You're talking about a lot of things that, you see like these grandiose decisions being made on the national level. And do you see, I don't remember my life ever altering terribly too much, because of what a president has done. Now, obviously, there's indirect things. Obviously, we could talk about the military and stuff like that and invading countries that we shouldn't invade. Things done in my name, for sure, no doubt. But as far as like a direct effect on my day-to-day life, it's very infrequent you see anything like that. But in local politics, you see it quite a bit. Can I ask where you went to college? I'm really impressed with your degree.
Well, I started off at Harvey Mudd in Southern California, which was quite a place to go back then. I was from Northern Virginia, so for me to go all the way to California, I'd never even visited California. And then I show up on the campus. My mother and I took a 66-hour bus ride from Washington, D.C. to just outside of Los Angeles. And my socks were stuck to my feet when I got off the bus.
Yeah, that's awful.
So I spent 4 years there, and I experienced 2 earthquakes, and I was ready to leave. Also, I learned that the air quality where I was about the poorest you could find in the United States. So I wasn't planning to stay there much longer. And so then I ended up going back for a second degree, a master's degree, and there it was a bifurcation. My dad wanted me to be like the next Carl Sagan, and he's probably watching tonight. And that seemed kind of exciting. But then there was this new field called science and technology studies. And I was bred as a scientist, but I realized that there are aspects of science that there's an echo, by the way. I don't know. Are you guys muted?
I'm not.
Okay, because I just noticed. Okay, so anyway, so the science technology studies is the philosophy, history, and sociology of science. And I realized if I was going to be a scientist, I had to understand the impact of science, right? And what the purpose of science was. I mean, I could be an astronomer. That'd be great, right? Be fun, exciting, inspirational. But when I started learning more about like the challenges humans face on a day-to-day basis, not only in the US, but elsewhere, it's like, that's kind of a privileged position to be in, right? And I felt like I also wanted to be more sociable. And so slowly but surely, I found environmental science, and Virginia was the place to go. I will say, which will come as a surprise, my mentor at Virginia was Pat Michaels, who many people may know if they know about the climate deniers. He was one of the preeminent climate deniers. And I knew that going in, but I said to myself, look, I know who I am. I know he's not going to poison me with that. And it'll be interesting, right, to kind of understand what's behind that. And so that was really an eye-opening experience for me. And I also said, look, he's going to support some student. It might as well be somebody who is more, maybe has better immunity to the kinds of things that he was willing to share. But I give Pat some credit, for giving me a broad base of exposure. I guess that's a nice way to put it.
No, it's interesting. I don't recognize the name, but yeah, I mean, you get to hear the other side of the argument. I mean, it's science. You want, a multiplicity of perspectives in it. I mean, all things being equal, only one, theory inconsistent with all other competing theories can be true. But, it's unfortunate sometimes, the opposite side gets completely just shut down nowadays. Nope, you're not even allowed to talk about it. That's not okay. That's not how science furthers itself. So that's actually a very interesting experience that you had. Real quick, I just want to say there's a bunch of comments going on here. I'm kind of new to being a host to this, so I apologize if I'm not getting this all right, Anna. But Josu Gonzalez is there saying hello. He wants to know if Homer can dismantle a dam in a river.
Well, I've been lifting weights, but I don't know if I have that power.
Okay. He's mentioning the Chad. He looks, Aiden Raymond, go Greens. Thank you for listening, tuning in. Let's see who else we got here. We got Shane Freeman saying that there's a little bit of echo with Peter's sound. Did you fix the echo? Is the echo fixed? Anyone?
I think if your co-host mutes while I'm speaking.
Oh, it goes on. Okay.
That might help.
All right. So, yeah, several people tuning in, which is very cool. Thank you guys from all over the country, it looks like. So you ended up getting a PhD in environmental science?
Yeah, environmental sciences at Virginia. That was in 1997. And I wrote several papers in the peer-reviewed literature related to looking at climate change in the data, mostly northern hemisphere, and looking at temperatures, which most people are familiar with, but also dew points, which is a measure of the moisture in the air, but also looking at it from the standpoint of on a daily cycle. So how does the daily cycle of temperature and dew point change?
Interesting, interesting. We're gonna have an entire show, if not several, on climate change, and so you probably are my first go-to guy here.
Well, that's awesome.
We were
I
just
love
talking
it.
yesterday about we need to get a PhD in something, and you obviously, the universe has provided you with a multitude of different hot topics. You becoming mayor, and of course now your education and background there. That might be as soon as next week, if not the week after. So I'll be in touch. Anyway, I want to get back to Galesburg real quick. So let's. I don't know. Did you hear about the another shooting in Minnesota? The police officer shot a 20-year-old black
I
kid.
know. I didn't see the video. It's horrible.
I was just watching the protest going on in Boston Center Square up there in Brooklyn Center. Sorry, and it's the same old stuff, and it's just a travesty. And last month in Houston, a Houston police officer shot a 1-year-old black baby in the head by shooting into a car that a thief who was running away carjacked the car, and the cop just started shooting into the car, and it turns out there was a 1-year-old baby in the back seat, got shot in the head. I can go on and on. I've been gathering data on policing in America for over a year now, hours upon hours a week, and it's just disgustingly disturbing. So tying this back into Galesburg, real quick before we go into this heavy stuff, I was looking up Galesburg on Wikipedia today, and it changed. It said Mayor Peter Schwartzman. So good for you. You're immortal.
My first wiki. Actually, my only previous reference in Wikipedia prior to this was it had something to do with the Green Party alderman. There's a link somewhere, but you can't search for my name. I don't know if you can now, but yeah. So good.
Yeah, it's very cool. Somebody did it. So I don't even know how people do that with Wikipedia, but it's updated.
People with special powers.
Exactly. So anyway, are there any police shenanigans? And you said obviously the chief of police is going to be on the side of the. You think of chief of police usually being conservative. I'm not saying they all are. Actually, I know the one here in Lake County is a Democrat and actually very liberal. But you tend to think of them as conservative, because they're very, law and order kind of people. And that's what the mottos you hear from the Republicans all the time. Has he reached out to you? Have you chatted with him? Are there any police issues you'll be dealing with directly as a mayor in Galesburg?
Well, I will tell you, since the new year, we've had more, I think, murders than we've had in a typical year, going back several years. Not all of those were gun related, and not all of those, some of them were self-defense. There's all kinds of weird stuff, but there are people who are venting and using violence as a way of venting. We've had a lot, in my opinion, we've had a lot more gun shots fired in the last 3 months than I recall in any period, and spring has just started. So this is very concerning to me. And I stated that at a recent council meeting, and the mayor said almost verbatim, we live in a relatively safe community. And that was it. My desire was that we need to stem this violence as soon as possible. And we need to pull in resources. So we have a lot of people who work in the mental health profession. We need to look for their expertise and guidance. We need to, and the police recognize that they are not skilled in those areas. They're not trained very much in those areas. And they're often being called to the scene where mental health is the primary problem, the primary challenge that they face when they arrive on the scene. And so we need to work together. We need to recognize there's no one entity that has some type of wizardry knowledge and experience. And we also need to, what I say, bring relief to the streets. When guns are fired, I'll just tell you, last weekend, there were 2 people shot in Galesburg, one in the leg and one in the chest. As far as I know, neither has perished, thankfully. But neither of the victims or people around the victims have revealed who their shooter was, for fear of retribution. Okay.
Is it a gang thing? Is there a gang issue in Galesburg?
I wouldn't call it that. I don't have a reason to call it that, but it is violence among familiar parties.
Okay.
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 And it is unfortunate, and this is not new. And we need to figure out ways to deal with it. So I ran on the view that we need to have what's called community policing in Galesburg. And that's where police walk the streets. Just like I was walking door to door all over town, I believe this police should be doing the same. I think they need to get to know their neighbors. They need to get to know who the eyes on the street are, and we have a lot of willing parties to do that. If there are houses that are invaded, with elements that are not constructive, we should know that, right? We should, and we should be clear that in our town we don't allow that. We will, and proactively. I need to talk about the proactive nature of this. So 4 years ago, we had a youth center. It was a large gymnasium with a separate building for other types of activities. It had a computers room in there. They had a lounge. They had a kitchen. It burned down. Okay, an arson. It was an arson situation. It has not been replaced. But that's where the vast majority of youth of color would go every day after school. And it has not been replaced by anyone. And the city council has made almost no overtures to do so. Well, I ran on the view, on the campaign, that we're going to build a youth center downtown that's accessible to everyone. And it's not just going to be a rec center. It's going to be a place for interaction between different people of different generations, different races, different ethnicities, different cultures. It's going to be a place where mentorship can be a primary instrument for improving the community, both the mentors and the mentees. It's really important that we are very proactive about that. That's how you stem violence in the long term.
Right.
You have to give youth something to do, something constructive. You have to give them hope. You have to give them direction. They have a lot of ambition. They have a lot of good ideas that they want to see implemented, but they have limited tools to see it happen. Right. I think we need to include the school district and the people involved. The junior high school, the principal of one of the main junior high schools in town, is a former student of mine. He graduated with an environmental studies degree from Knox College. Nice. I am so excited to sit down with Mr. Young and talk about ways in which the city can partner with his school and give those kids opportunities to do constructive things after school and in the summertime. Unless we do that, we are just waiting for bad stuff to happen. Sure. Because it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a rock scientist. My dad's a geologist, so I like to use rock scientist. It doesn't take a rock scientist, right, to realize that if we do not give young people positive experiences in a very economically challenged environment, they are going to learn, they're going to figure out how to deal with it themselves. And many of them are going to slip through the cracks. And then they're going to become further challenges, right, in our community. And we don't want that. They are, I fundamentally believe, and I think this is something we all, conservative or liberal or progressive, whatever side of the fence you're on, we can all agree that a young person is a potential positive force of change, right? And so, but if we don't give them things that will materialize in a positive change, then that's on us. That's not on them. And so that's something I want to really see activated even this summer. Why wait until next summer? People can sit around planning and doing this for months at a time. We don't have time to do that. How many more shootings are going to occur? How many more youth are going to get influenced by perhaps older, less positive element of the community, right? We need to be the positive elements, and we have them. When I was walking door to door, I'll give you one story. My friend Lonnie, African-American gentleman, grew up in a neighboring town. He's my age. He comes to the door. He sees me. And he's like, what do you have my door for? I'm running for mayor. I'm running for mayor. You running for mayor? What you running for mayor for? And, you know, kind of aggressive. I'm like, I'm running for mayor because I'm at your door because this town needs to be a town for everyone. And I need to know what you're thinking about and what I can do to improve your life and your neighbors' lives. That's what I'm here for. So the first 5 minutes was a little tense. I can tell you now, Lonnie joined me side by side and walked and canvassed with me many days. We also did 5 trash pickups throughout the community because it was his idea. And so that's the kind of material change that can occur in a community.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome.
Very exciting.
Very cool. Real quick, we have a comment by Shane Freeman about the Minnesota shooting that they're using the gun for my taser excuse. Yeah, that's a new one. Rob D. Rich is asking, what roles do a mayor play in relations to the prison in Galesburg?
Well, that's a good one. You know, we do have a prison. It's medium security, but I think it has 2,000 inmates. It's defaulted on its water bill. I know that much. It owes the city about $80,000 because it hasn't paid its water bill.
Oh.
So that's one way we interact.
Is this privately run or public?
It's state run.
Okay.
So the state hasn't paid its bill.
Right.
Okay. But here's the thing. When and this is a whole nother conversation, but when people don't pay their bills, we shut their water off. But when the prison doesn't pay its bills, what do? Obviously, we can't shut the water off. So this shows the problem with shutting water off for certain people, not other people. Well, it shows the problem. We shouldn't be shutting off water during a pandemic. But that's a whole nother conversation. I can tell you that there are several members of the college, my college, Knox College, that teach at the prison and have done so for time. I think it's from what I understand, I've not done that myself, but I think it's a very important thing to be engaged with that whole situation. I mean, that's the wrong way to put it, but what I'm saying is we have a lot of employees at the prison. The prison gets a really bad name because what you hear in the streets is, well, when we built the prison in the 80s, you know, all these bad elements from Chicago moved down to be next to the inmates, and the town has gone to shit since then. And I'm like, hold on a second. I know a lot of people that moved from Chicago to Galesburg, and they're doing a lot of positive things in this community. So don't paint with a broad brush. Okay, that doesn't help us. Okay. Also, we have a lot of employees at the prison, right? And many of them are very important elements in our community. They're community leaders, frankly. I met the warden. Actually, I played tennis with a former warden at the prison, and he's also a soccer coach at the community college, right? A very important person in our community. So let's understand. Now, I will say this too. I went to Chicago probably 15 years ago to learn about how recently released inmates can be put to productive use in a community through urban agriculture. There's a group called Growing Home that's based in Inglewood. And I took students to visit them, and it was amazing. We'd have lunch. My students and some of the recent individuals who were matriculated into the training program for Growing Home, and they'd say, "Where are you guys from?" And the students say, "We're from Galesburg." And these people would say, "Oh, we know Galesburg. We spent a couple of years there." And it was fascinating. And they were having pizza, and then they would be teaching us how to grow food. It was fascinating, right? And we didn't. It was totally unexpected. That was not an interaction I anticipated. But I learned that, again, going back to that idea, that we can all agree that young people need an olive branch, right? They need direction. They need positive influences. The same can be said for every human being. It's not just the young people, right? People make mistakes and people do their time. But once they're released, we have to embrace them, right? We have to embrace their humanness. We have to give them opportunities. We can't, you know how many jobs that most people who have felonies can get? like that many, right? There are so few opportunities for them. Well, urban agriculture provides them opportunity, right? There are other positions that they can find, but we have to assist them. The current state doesn't do that very well. We know recidivism rates are very high, not because of the individuals necessarily, but because of the way the system operates. So we have an opportunity, frankly, I think. I know this will go again. I mean, I'm elected now, so it may go against some of my constituents. I think we have an opportunity to embrace recently released inmates. Their families may even live here. So let's embrace them. Let's not reject them. Let's not stereotype them. Let's not brandish them with more hatred and more negativity. They have done their time. So let's put them to productive work. Let's give them opportunities. That's the main thing I'm trying to say. And I think if we do that, we actually can see that there are many ways that Galesburg can strengthen its economy and its community with open arms, as opposed to building walls and gates.
Very cool. Calvin, you want to ask some questions?
Yeah, maybe we can spin into something else I was interested in, and it might be related. So, urban agriculture is an interesting topic, and I'm also I was reading articles on your website, some of the news pieces, and they talked about supporting travel that isn't by a motorized vehicle, and I wondered if that implied like separated bike paths, because bike paths, as somebody who cycles in the winter, even here in Chicago, despite some of the plowing, you share the road and it can get a little dicey at times. So I believe in something like separated bike paths, and I was wondering also if you guys had planned for plowing bike paths during the winter, because this now allows somebody who is working a lower paying job to afford at least transit to their place of work, and to be able to rely on that avenue of transit even into the winter months when the snow is taking up some of the paths, knowing that those paths would be plowed. And I wonder, is this a way for people to get around, to climb back maybe from previously being convicted, or maybe because the work is paying low and they just need more opportunities? Could you talk about your kind of green infrastructure plans?
Yeah, so we have some streets here that have bike lanes. They've gotten mixed reviews, and it's been a struggle. Most of those were funded from external sources, because there are state sources that want to push this forward. They are probably underutilized, largely because they're not connected. So you can't have some streets with bike lanes and then there's, where do they go? They go nowhere. I am definitely a believer that you need connectivity. The comprehensive plan, which we paid for 2 years ago, but it has not been reviewed by the mayor council because the mayor didn't see fit to do so for over 2 years. That's going to be something we look at ASAP when I take office in May. In that plan, which I've read like 4 times, it talks a lot about interconnectivity and the importance of that for a community. I do definitely think we need more pedestrian friendly arteries, and so the downtown is a great place for that. When I think of European cities, and also I think of Charlottesville, where I was, a graduate student. It's considered one of the nicest places to live, in part because it has a section off downtown that people can walk, exclusively walk. I think it's really important. No, I think your point about ensuring the access during the winter. One thing I didn't mention during the campaign, but I've mentioned it before at council meetings. Galesburg actually used to have a trolley system. You have to go back to the early 1920s. We were the first city in the United States that was targeted for its removal. That was revealed in court in the 1950s. And there's no record of that. I mean, at least, there's record, but there's no one alive remembers that. It's 100 years ago. I would be strongly in favor of returning something like that to Galesburg. Now, that's a large enterprise capital project, and I didn't run on it because it seems too far-fetched. Well, if they could do it in the 1920s, I think we have the resources to do something like that now. But it has to be a priority, and I have to sell it to the community. That's what I'll try to do. I don't have the power to implement it, but I have the power to discuss it and look at what the numbers look like. What I found looking in my history books, the 1920s, people could get around very, very easily, very smoothly with those trolleys. And I don't think it was accidental that Galesburg was the first city targeted for its removal. And if there had not been collusion from many companies during that time, we probably all be running on trolleys right now in 2021. So that's something too. I think bikes are wonderful. I mean, obviously the roads do get icy. Even if you plow them, right, they can still be icy and dangerous. I understand some people like that, they like that experience. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have that available to them, but I think there are probably more efficient ways and maybe effective ways to get everyone around. We do have we have a lot of older people that live in Galesburg, and they need to get to the hospital, they need to get to the rec center, they need to get to the various places downtown, and we need to make sure that they have access to those places year round, snow or no snow, ice or no ice. So I'm looking at the big picture. I will say this, which is often most politicians refuse to admit. When you start working on roads, it gets very expensive very quickly. And what that means is that it's not that we don't repair the roads, but we have to have a broader understanding of what we're trying to do. We're trying to get from point A to point B. That's what we're trying to do, right? And we not only today, but into the future. And we already know that within a few years, we're going to have vehicles that kind of take us places, like the Jetsons, okay? Now, the first class of those vehicles will be on the road. So they still need a road, but probably in not so long, there'll be hovercraft type vehicles. And then we won't need the roads. And the roads can then be converted into gardens, right? Or and I'm not saying, I don't think this has to be 50 years down the road. I think that could be much sooner than that. I think the technology is moving so fast that we can't grasp it. And every mile of road we put in, like for instance, we believe that when we asphalt a road, it's going to last 30 years. And my question is, are we going to need that road in 30 years? Now, that's heretical to say in the modern culture, particularly in Galesburg. It's heretical. And I wouldn't have said it prior to the election. And I'm not saying that we're not going to pick up the roads. That's probably one of the biggest complaints I've heard from the community. So we're going to do what the community asks, but we also are going to consider what the other alternatives are. That's what I brought to the table. When they voted me in, that's what they asked for. They got, one of the beauties of this election is all of my writings, all of my, whatever you want to call it, all of my thoughts are on paper, on the internet. Okay. They're not hidden in somebody's basement. They're not in the back of some boardroom. Okay. They are out there for the community to adjust, reject, do whatever they want. And, that's why I'm here. I'm here to think and get feedback. I think we have to think differently about our roads. I think we have to think differently about communication. We see what happened with COVID in education, right? It's transformed our understanding of education. Now, I'm not saying that we should be educating children in front of computers. No, I'm not saying we should not be doing that. However, what I am suggesting perhaps is, what is it about that face-to-face that's so important? And if that's so important, then why are we filling classrooms with too many students? Right? What about having an outdoor laboratory at every school where children can be outside playing in the dirt, and not just for gym class or recess, but actually part of the learning process? You know, that's the education of the future. And so to me, what COVID is, you know, the crazy time we're in, has allowed us to maybe think a little bit outside the box and recognize we can do things differently, and that there are costs to doing so, right? Having children stuck in their own house for too long, or us too long, it creates other problems. But it also enables us to realize that if the weather's too bad, we don't have to cancel the meeting. We can still have dialogue like we're having right now.
Right. Very interesting. Very cool. We only have a couple of minutes left. I think last time we were talking, there was like, you know, just a slight concern we weren't going to be able to fill up the hour with questions. Man, I got like about 800 more. Just about your mayorship. I mean, not even getting into like, you know, your PhD and all that stuff. That'll be a totally different session. Peter, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. I want to congratulate you on your victory. Everything you're saying sounds extremely encouraging. And I want to draw a distinction here real quick, a point to make to people who are listening, that progressive really means exactly what it sounds like. It means that somebody who's looking towards the future to make things better than they are now. I'm not saying that all conservatives who call themselves conservatives are this way, but the word conservative means to maintain the status quo or even go back to how things were before. We don't need that. We need to look ahead to the future. We need to, first of all, so we have one. Okay, and that's where climate change comes in, and we'll be talking about that soon. So I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. Rob, Shane, Aiden, Josu, thank you. Calvin, do you have any last comments for us?
I want to highlight that, Peter, congratulations. Of course, I don't know if I've said it yet, but my favorite part of this was that you reached out to everyone. You knocked on every door. And you spoke to everyone who's a member of the working class and caring about your fellow people. So I really appreciate that. I love that approach, and I hope more people embrace that, especially those in the Green Party. That'd be great.
Absolutely. Peter, any last second plugs you'd like to make?
Well, I'm so enthused that this show is going live, and I've listened to a couple of your previous events, and I thought they were awesome. And the more we have independent media, we absolutely need independent media out there sharing our dreams and our ambitions and our successes. There's so much negativity in the mainstream media. That's what they're using, fear, to just drive home every piece of information that they serve us in a platter, and we have to resist that. We have to go back to what makes us human. What makes us real. What makes us forgiving and empathetic. That's what makes us beautiful as a species. And you guys are doing that, and I'm so thankful. And I'm willing to join in whatever capacity you want me to in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, and again, congratulations. Good fortune for Galesburg, Illinois. Again, I have very fond memories, so good for you. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Green Party series. Tune in, stay tuned until next week, when we'll have something very interesting to talk about, I'm sure. Till then, everybody have a good and green life.
Take care.
Take care, everybody.